Hi, and welcome to Mrs. PM Reads, where we are continuing in the Magic Circle by Katherine Neville. In our last video, we were hearing about a letter from John Mark, who is traveling with his uncle Barnabas. He's writing to his mom. It is AD 42, and he is pretty much complaining to her about Saul of Tarsus, who in his conversion changes his name to Paul. But right now, he's just talking mostly about Saul. And that is where we stopped. I believe the last sentence, I didn't go back and check, but I think the last sentence were, but if that were all he'd done, I should not be writing this letter. It's something far worse, and I believe it bodes serious ill. I think that's where we stopped. So, do you recall, now this is him writing to his mom, do you recall some 8 or 9 years ago, not long after the master's death, Miriam of Magdalene came round at the behest of Joseph of Arimathea and asked each of us to recount what we could of the master's last week on earth. Though I was a child at the time, even I was asked to tell her all I knew, which proved lucky, as it seems. Only last year I received a letter from Miriam just before she decamped from Ephesus to join her brother and sister at the mission they've begun in Gaul. In this letter, Miriam told me she'd sealed up a great many scrolls of those eyewitness reports in clay cylinders and dispatched them by the hand of James Zebedee to Joseph of Arimathea in Britannia. At first, the rest of her letter meant little to me. It was only when Saul of Tarsus revealed he knew something of those documents and began asking questions about them that I took a closer look at what that might mean. Miriam had heard back at last from Joseph to the effect that the documents, combined with information he'd gathered on his own, had enabled him to see a much larger picture than was possible just after the master's death. Though Joseph had declined to share this in detail with Miriam until she arrives in the Celtic Islands, she was able to pass along to me what he did reveal. It appears in my role as water jar boy at the last Presach supper, I might have seen or heard, or perhaps even done a few things to help expand that view. But the secret I didn't understand myself until Miriam's letters involves the master's last instructions to me on that fateful evening exactly 10 years ago, and what those directives really meant. He told me I should go to the serpent pool carrying a big pitcher, and when others arrived and followed, I should pass through the Essene gate and lead them to our house on Mount Zion. They'd been told to look for one sign, to follow the water bearer. But what I didn't realize until Miriam pointed out is that the water bearer is also a constellation, as well as the symbol of the world age after this one. For I am the Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, the master said. Did he mean to connect himself to both the beginning and the end of the current aeon? This question brings me again to Saul of Tarsus, Mother. Though I've lived near the man every day for nearly a year, he remains an enigma. But just now, I believe a key has surfaced. He's changed his name from Saul to Paul. Some think he's merely copying the master's well-known quirk of giving all his disciples nicknames. but I think I've deciphered the truth, that it has to do instead with the master's passion for finding hidden meaning in numbers, the geometria. I calculated for myself what hidden meaning might be produced by such a symbolic change. The numerical value of Saul in Hebrew letters adds to 90, which equals the letter Tzaddi, Tzaddi, a letter that also represents, the astrological constellation of Aquarius. But Paul in Hebrew numerology has the value of 110. Ooh. Q, I think that's a Q, QOPH-YOD, Quofiad, signifying the signs of the fish and the virgin. That is the new age of Pisces and Virgo we've just entered. In Greek numerology, the meaning of the letters is much the same. Solos, with the value of 901, represents Ikahos, Bacchus, or Dionysus, the water bearer who brings forth not this age, but the one after it. Whereas Paulos, 780 and 81, symbolizes Sophia or Virgo, on the one hand, and Ophis, the serpent or sea beast, that is fish, on the other. Hence, Mother, I believe that through this change of spelling from Saul to Paul, he intends to announce himself rather than the master as avatar of the coming age. Interesting. To Miriam, another letter, of Magdala as at Massilla, Roman Gaul, from Miriam Mark at Jerusalem, Roman Judea. So this is John Mark's mother writing to Mary Magdalene. Dearest Miriam, I apologize for the untidiness of both my penship and my thoughts. Although a ship bound for Massilla now leaves from Joppa weekly, I know you don't plan to stay there on the coast of Gaul for long, that you'll soon be heading north to join the rest of your family in the Pyrenees. So I'm hastening to dispatch this letter at once. I also enclose the letter I just received from my son. As you see, he requests that I share his words with no one, but his letter triggered in me such turbulent feelings, Miriam. There are things I fear I should have told you earlier in your capacity as apostle or messenger. However, I admit these things meant little to me until John's recent letter brought back so many memories of events that took place in the last week of the master's life. Specifically, what occurred that very last night. As you surely know by now, through reports you've received from others, even before reading this letter of John's, the last Passover supper attended by the master took place here at my residence in the upper city. But what perhaps no one knows, except myself, is the action the master himself paid to the planning of this meal down to the finest detail. He was very clever about the appointments he wanted to be made within the upper chamber of my home, where he designated the meal would take place. Some of these appointments were actually so lavish as to surprise me. It was most important, the master stressed to me over and over, that everything before, during, and after the meal must happen precisely as he asked. Then he added, in strictest confidence, that he hoped just after the supper to retire to the cave on Joseph's estate at Gethsemane to perform an initiation ritual. This now seems significant. The evening of the supper, also at the master's request, I arranged that Rosa and my staff of servants would prepare the meal and carry the courses upstairs, but they were to remain outside the door for greater privacy, while my son John and I would serve the guests on our own. This explains why I was so fortunately able to see and hear everything that passed during that most remarkable meal. I wrote it down soon after as a kind of story. Only now, for the first time, do I see that evening in a whole new light. And Miriam, although you were not present at the meal yourself, and though what I have to say may shock you, in rereading my observations, I've come to realize that a great many of the events that took place at that strange supper must, in fact, have revolved around you. Interesting. Of course, it has long occurred to me that there must have been a valid explanation why you were not asked to what the master surely knew would be his last supper among his disciples. After all, it was known to everyone you were the chosen disciple, Alpha and Omega. He often called you, didn't he? Then, too, after his death, you were the first witness of his ascent to the bosom of God. But the decisive factor, as I see it, Miriam, is that well before the supper, you were already initiated into the mysteries. Undoubtedly, you've received many reports of those events from others who were present, but their reports may have been colored by their own participation, thus missing the crucial point. Indeed, it is possible that the whole meal and the events surrounding it were designed by the master as a kind of test of the other disciples, as my son once speculated, to see which among them might turn out to be wheat or chaff. That is, which would, at the end of that evening and of the master's life, prove worthy of transformation he'd always offered those who passed such tests. I have written this story as if I were an outside observer. I ask you alone to be the judge. And we're sitting only at 13 minutes. Oh, let me read this little bit. There's different sections of it. Okay, so this is John Mark's mom's notes from the Last Supper meal. The last meal. Some days before the Passover, for reasons unknown to anyone but himself, the master told his disciples by what means they must enter the city that night to locate the site of their supper, to wait by the Serpent Pond near the Essence Gate south of town. There, a man bearing a water pitcher would come and lead them, one by one, to the appointed spot. By this device, the master ensured that only the 12 would be present at the meal. By arriving last himself, therefore, the master was 13th. There was controversy over the secrecy, this unorthodox approach to planning a ritual meal, whose rules, after all, had been handed down more than 1,000 years ago, directly from God to Moses. How could they know, for instance, that the meal would be prepared according to Torah, using proper rules of cleanliness and cooking technique, and according also to the Mishnah? The leaven must be searched for by candlelight and cast out the night before. Who would see to that? The master ignored these complaints. He shrugged and simply said, all was arranged. It was a surprise that the water bearer was young John Mark, the 10-year-old son of Miriam Mark, who, along with her brother Barnabas from Cyprus, was among the master's wealthiest patrons. Her palatial residence on the western side of Mount Zion had for years been Simon Peter's second home when not in Galilee, and the master's fireside chats there with his disciples, lavishly catered by her staff of servants, were often known to go into the wee hours of the night. But on this occasion, a surprise was in store. When each disciple was greeted at the gates by Rosa, Miriam Mark's housekeeper, he was escorted by another servant, not to the dining hall, but up several flights of stairs to an unknown room beneath the very rafters of the house. Furthermore, this room was outfitted with costly furnishings, the like of which none had seen before in a private home. Low marble tables exotically inlaid with colored stones that glittered in the yellow light of Persian hanging lamps, thick carpets from the Ionian coast, and multicolored tapestries redolent of the African north coast. Huge samovars of tea and giant urns brimming with foamy wine set everywhere around the room. Although many of the 12 were successful professionals, tax collectors like Matthew, or well-to-do proprietors of fishing fleets like Simon and Andrew and the Zebedees. Still, they were taken aback by this extravagant splendor, which seemed to approach a nearly Roman level of decadence. They stood awkwardly gazing around Mary and Mark's upper room at the Roman couches, where 3 together could recline while dining, too awed to help themselves to any wine or to converse much until, at last, the master arrived. He seemed somehow preoccupied and motioned for the others to be seated. He didn't sit at once himself, but paced back and forth beside the door, as if waiting for something to happen. The servants brought bowls of water and towels. When they departed and the door was shut behind them, the master, without speaking, took up a bowl and a towel and set them by a nearby table. Then, removing all his clothes, he wrapped the towel around his waist, knelt on the floor before Judas, and began to wash his feet. The others were embarrassed and more than a little shocked, more so when they saw he intended to do the same to each. One by one, he came before them to wash their feet, wiping them dry with the towel as they looked on uneasily. But when the master reached Simon Peter, the disciple jumped to his feet in refusal, crying, "Never, never, you shall not wash my feet, not mine." "Then it seems we have nothing in common," the master told him quietly. He was not smiling. "If you all believe I'm your master, you should follow my example. I hope you'll do the same when I'm no longer here to show you what love is. It's an arrogant servant, Peter, who can learn nothing and thinks himself greater than anyone who sent him. When I am gone, I hope my followers will be recognized by the fact that they serve one another and love mankind." "Then wash me, master," Peter cried enthusiastically, sitting again in haste. "Not just my feet, wash my hands too, and my head." The master burst out laughing. "Only what's dirty," he said, and glancing at Judas with an enigmatic smile, he added, "Most of what I see here is clean, but not all." A comment that later was interpreted by many as a reference to the dirty money Judas had accepted in exchange for betraying him. When the master put his linen robe on again, he reclined on the couch between Simon Peter and young Johann Zebedee, whom he affectionately dubbed Parthenos, the virgin girl, for his childlike, if often unruly, innocence. The master spoke throughout nearly the entire meal with a flushed intensity, eating little, save some sips of the ritual wine and a few tastes of the traditional symbolic foods. As to what he was speaking about, it appeared his principal interest was to recite, as age-old tradition dictated, the history of the Passover and the exodus of our people from Egypt. But despite the master's keen interest in rabbinical law, It did seem to those present that he placed unusual emphasis on food and drink connected with this ritual meal, and even more upon those things forbidden by God, especially the leaven. Here is what the master said, and we're going to stop there. Ooh, that took a long time just for a couple of pages. Okay. So we'll find out what Jesus said at the Last Supper, according to John Mark's mom, in the next video. All right, you guys. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.